And welcome to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business. New episodes again each weekday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on thatbusinessnetwork.com and also made available on iTunes and on YouTube. Today, my guest is Glenn Mattson. He is a seasoned veteran of the selling profession, and he's personally built one of the leading franchises for Sandler training, with his office ranking consistently in the top 1% of trainers worldwide. His niche is working with financial service producers and field managers who want to shorten their selling cycles, grow their revenues, and boost their team's productivity and margins for profit. Among Glenn's clients are MDRT, as well as court of the table members who attribute a great deal of their success to the principles, practices, and above all, the accountability Glenn brings to the practice. So Glenn, welcome to the program today.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Greatly appreciate it.
I always love to talk about salesmanship, so I'll open it up. Why is hiring great salespeople so difficult for most managers?
Well, it's very interesting. What happens is it's a two-tone process. Most managers, unfortunately, what they do is they try to sell the position versus actually try to interview the candidate. And so what they're finding most of the time, what they're doing is they're trying to get the individual excited about the opportunity versus trying to uncover from the individual actually fulfill the opportunity. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that if we look at statistics, most people get hired based on their skills, experiences, and results. That most people get fired because of poor attitude or lack of behavior. So when we look at, Jamie, hiring and recruiting and interviewing people, we have to take a look at is what are the attitudes and the behaviors that are going to be absolutely crucial for them to be successful in this business. And let's peel back the onion and find out if they have the right ingredients to be successful at that firm, at the wherever they're going to be hired. Do they have the right pieces to do that? And unfortunately, when people are interviewing, they're really just trying to sell a position versus interviewing the individual. And even when they do the interviews, they're actually looking and trying to discover the wrong stuff. So it's not that difficult to figure out someone's skills and experiences and results. But again, the magic dust usually is between that attitude and the behavior pieces.
If somebody is let's say somebody's coming from one industry like the car business, and they're a great car salesman, and now you're bringing them into the medical field, selling some medical product. If they're great selling in one industry, will they be good at selling in another industry? Is salesmanship transferable across industries?
It's interesting. That's always the magic question, right? And the short answer is no, but yes. Now, listening skills, questioning skills, having a high self-esteem, being a decision maker, having the capacity to take risks, that is indifferent of what type of market that you're in and where you're selling. But what does change a little bit is how you go to market. So for instance, if I'm in pharmaceutical, like you mentioned, well, many pharmaceutical individuals find themselves at least 20 or 30% of the time having to prospect. And they're going to have to go face-to-face, go into doctor's offices, making phone calls to get that client base up. Taking the other individual that you mentioned, a car salesman, they don't do a lot of prospecting because they wait for people to actually walk into the building. So when we look at the type of market you're going after, we have to make sure that your skill sets and your attitudes fit within that framework. So for instance, if I was going to sell to the government, I may not be that successful because I'm a very impatient person. And I won't have the ability to have a sales cycle go for 2 years. Yet, when you talk to a pharmaceutical individual, they have to have a high self-esteem because many of the people they're dealing with are doctors and surgeons who have a high self-esteem.
Right. And
there's a fair amount of rejection that goes on. So there are certain skills for sure and attitudes that transfer regardless, but there are sort of some independent things that you have to take a look at, which is why some are successful in one area, can't make it in another area.
So from a manager's standpoint, what kind of probing questions then can they ask the candidate to make sure they're a fit for the position versus focusing on selling the position, which is what you were saying is a mistake that a lot of managers make when they're interviewing?
That's a great question. And, the amazing thing is, and we do this all the time when we go into our interviewing skill sets, is that most managers don't actually know what competencies they need to discover to find out if they're going to be successful. They know the results, but they don't know the competencies that they need to have to get there. And they also don't understand sometimes the behaviors or the attitudes that drive those competencies. So for most managers, it's a lack of awareness of what are the pieces of the puzzle that I really need to have someone be very productive here. And along with the awareness, is do they have the knowledge of how to ask the right questions? Because it's never the first question, it's the second or third question where you start to peel back the onion really to discover it. And unfortunately, we have a third piece of the pie, which is do they have the guts to ask the right questions? Now, Jamie, I don't know if it's true for some of the people listening in, but there are some that have a requirement or a quota or a number of hires they have to bring in each year. So when they have that number, they and also have different areas. For instance, I can go hire a already seasoned veteran salesperson. Well, that seasoned veteran salesperson is extremely successful, yet the sales manager wasn't extremely successful in sales. Sometimes they have a need for approval. Sometimes they have a fear of rejection. Sometimes they have self-doubt in their own ability on interviewing that candidate because that candidate was better at that skill set than they were. So we have to balance their own head trash from aware of what they need to ask along with the skill set of how to actually peel back the onion.
So why do so many otherwise talented people fail at sales?
Well, that we could be here until the holidays on that one. There are many talented people that actually fail at sales because most of them or some of them don't have a plan. Or if they don't have a plan, what I mean by a plan is not the wrong lagging indicators, which is, hey, I have to do this amount of business. I have to produce or have that much of my business be sold that type of product line. Those are results. We can't control results. We can only influence results. What we can control is our behavior that we have to do on a daily basis to get the results. So most people fail in the business or fail to reach some of their objectives because they don't have goals that burn their passions, but they also don't have a plan that says, what do I have to do on a daily basis from a behavioral standpoint to get the result that I'm looking for to get the objectives accomplished? So one is many don't have the right roadmap to help them get there. And then even those that do have the roadmap, Jamie, the key word is execution. Mm-hmm. Once you have the roadmap, are you willing to do whatever it takes legally, morally, and ethically to follow your roadmap? Right. Are you willing to do what it says? Because if not, it's no good.
You know, one way I struggle is I consider myself a good salesman. My core competency is real estate. It's actually, I got on radio and podcasting to begin with 4 years ago. I was doing a show strictly on real estate, and I've been a top producing real estate agent. I consider myself a good salesman, but where I'm weak is sourcing new business. If you bring them to me, I can sell them, but I don't want to go find them. Mm-hmm. How do I overcome that? Or is it just a matter you just got to pick up the phone and make those calls?
Well, you know what? If it would be that easy, then no one like yourself would have that. So most successful individuals will say, if you bring me someone, I am amazing at what I do. You get them in front of me, I can list them, I can get them to love us, and we'll be able to sell our house and get referrals. It's just finding new people. Now, many individuals, when it looks to come to prospecting, which is going out and finding those new listings, mm-hmm. is the fact that most of them, and again, not everybody, but the number one driver that holds us back from prospecting is this thing called fear of rejection. Right. And it's called need for approval. Now, the most successful people have 28% of the businesses off the table like that because of need for approval. People newer in the business will turn around and almost towards 80% of their opportunities are lost because that's fear. Imagine for a moment, Jamie, if you weren't afraid at all. Now, the other piece that happens for some, maybe you, maybe others like you, which is, I know what I have to do to prospect, and I don't want to do it. I'm not in the position I have to do it anymore. So the will and the ability and the will starts to conflict each other. The willingness in the beginning is you had to. Now you don't need to. The question is, will you? Right. And for many, they choose not to.
So how do people prospect effectively today? Is pick up the phone and calling still a viable form of prospecting? The email I like email because it's simple and you don't have to worry about the rejection. Is very rarely do people reply back to you with something they would just hit delete. So email makes it simple, but it's not very effective in my opinion. How are people prospecting effectively today in just real estate sales, for instance?
Sure, and again, different industries have different processes for that. But what's starting to happen, it's a phenomenon for the last about 14 months, and people are starting to turn around and get the understanding of it, which is social media. It's great for creating awareness. Can you utilize it prospecting? Absolutely. But in some format, when we start to look at it, a lot of individuals that do the emails and the social marketing, they do it in spite of or instead of the other stuff. And they're doing it because they don't want to pick up the telephone. Now, am I telling you that picking up the telephone and making cold or warm calls or even setting people up for seminars, however you go to work and fill your prospecting wheel, is it the most effective way? Absolutely not. But it is probably one of the most effective ways to overcome your fears and your anxieties. It's learning how to swim by jumping in the pool.
Right.
So one of the quickest ways to control your emotions, talk quick on your feet, lower your anxieties, get rid of guilt, get rid of what we call emotional involvement. So when someone throws a ball at you, your head starts to get all joggled, and it gets joggled, you forget what to say. And you know this is true for individuals who are prospecting. When they hang up the telephone, they go, I should have said this, or I could have said that, and why didn't I say that? Again, it wasn't a skill issue. The problem was you panicked.
Right. And I know myself, I'm all about social media and email marketing, but I hate picking up that phone. But you're right, that it creates great brand awareness. I hear people all the time, Jamie, I see your show, I see you do this, see that. But, when it comes to going out and getting sponsors, and that's on the show side of things, on my real estate side of things, it's an area where I struggle and stuff. And so just, some good information right there that I can definitely relate to. So currently talking to Glenn Mattson. He is with Sandler Training. Learn more, Mattson.sandler.com. And when we come back from the break, we're going to continue this discussion on salesmanship and discuss who has the advantage when a buyer or seller meet. Who's got the upper hand when those two come together. So you're currently listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business. Welcome back to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business. My guest today, Glenn Mattson with Sandler Training, and learn more at Mattson.sandler.com. We're talking about salesmanship, which is so crucial to every successful business. So, Glenn, when a buyer and seller meet, who's got the upper hand and why?
Always the magic question. It's interesting. When you take a look at a very traditional buyer-seller dance, what starts to happen is that most salespeople perceive that the buyer does. And that creates anxiety, it creates power plays, it creates fears of taking risks and asking certain questions, and etc. Reality, at least our belief, is that there is no upper hand. And there's no difference between one buyer and another buyer and a salesperson. They're two individuals that are equally sitting down having a business conversation. And one of the things we try and help still in salespeople and managers, etc., is that feeling that I am not less than you because you either earn more or you're the buyer or you're putting a power play onto me. The more power plays they do, the more they're struggling to gain that power. And if you don't buckle with it, and your mindset is, you are no different than me, Jamie. You go to bed the same way I do. You wake up, take showers. There's no difference. The only thing that's different is our roles are different. And we are still two professional individuals having a conversation together about business. So in my mind, when we train people, we want to make sure that there is no unequilibrium. It's an equal playing field between a buyer and a seller. And when you have that mindset, your confidence goes higher. When your confidence goes higher, your courage goes through the roof. And when your courage goes through the roof, now you have the capacity to ask the right type of questions, the right way, to really figure out if there's an opportunity here or not.
Is there something that a salesperson can do in the first 60 seconds to get a commitment?
In the first 60 seconds, it's interesting. We call it expectations. There is a way to get commitments in 60 seconds, but the first 60 seconds, historically, we call it upfront contracts, and it's usually a little more than 60 seconds, and it's about expectations. What usually creates anxiety is you have an idea in your head, Jamie, of what you want to accomplish during this meeting. I have an idea of what I want to accomplish. The problem is we've never kind of agreed on what they are. I've never shared with you maybe what my expectations are, and maybe you haven't shared with you what mine is. So what happens is when we talk about expectations, we have expectations of time. We have expectations of what the purpose of the meeting is. We have expectations of what do you want to get out of the meeting, Jamie? If we're going to meet for an hour, what are some of the things that you're hoping to uncover in the next hour? Let me share with you what I'm hoping to uncover. And then the last thing that you should pretty much iron out before the meeting starts is, how are we going to end the meeting? You know, your problems never happen at the end of the sales call. The problems that happen at the end of the sales call actually originated in the beginning of the sales call. So if you want to reduce anxiety and make sure both of you are in the same field and same point of view, is we have to get on the same page about expectations. Because if not, we have what's called mutual mystification, and that's really dangerous.
When you're on a sales call, who should be doing the majority of the talking? The person that is selling the product, or should you be listening to the person who you're trying to sell to? Because I think, when a salesman is nervous, they just want to keep talking, so you can't say no, so you can't butt in with objections. Is that a good strategy to have, or should they sit back and just pause and let you talk?
Yeah, there's always that infamous thing. Do I talk until I give up, right? So a classic salesperson really does talk way too much. The average salesperson talks way too much. The way we look at it is, the buyer is the one with the issue. The buyer is also the one that understands the reasons for the issue. The buyer is also the one that holds the purse strings. And lastly, is the buyer also is the one that has the ability to make decisions or not. So if they're the judge and they're the jury, why are we doing all the talking as a salesperson? So the reality is, in our mindset with Sandler, is we believe a salesperson speak only 30% of the time, and they should be listening 70%. A great salesperson is not a phenomenal talker. A great salesperson is unbelievable at asking great questions and being a very good listener. And based on what is said, they hear it, they respond to it, to figure out again, is there any reason the two of us should do business together? The people who talk a lot usually have anxiety, they don't know what to say. Unfortunately, most have been trained to go in and do an approach talk, or you go in and pull out your laminate and tell your story. It doesn't help people buy. People buy emotionally and they justify it intellectually. It's not a whoever talks the longest and the most wins. So salespeople should at least try to use the ratios that someone gave them, which is 1 mouth and 2 ears. Try that for a while. Just try that ratio. You can try it.
The power of listening. I touch on that from time to time on the program. It's probably one of the most underused skills in business. Everybody feels they need to talk.
That's so true.
So what are the top 3 challenges that sales managers face in our country?
I would say the top 3, and that's a topic, but I'll give you the top 3 is, the first is execution to a plan. And the execution to a plan is, the majority of people, unfortunately, walking planet Earth, 80% have no idea what they want in life. They go to work, they come home, they go to sleep, they do it over again. 16% of the population have an idea or a concept, Jamie, of what they want to accomplish in life. Just a concept. Yet only less than 4% of the individuals, about 3, have an idea and they have it written down, but less than 1% actually follow their plan. And the individuals that follow their plan earn 9 times more than those individuals that have a concept of it. 9 times more in a lifetime. It's a shocking number. So the things that I would tell you, that the 3 challenges is that their staff, their people, their salespeople have not figured out what motivates me. I understand what my objectives are for the company and the firm, but what's in it for me? So many don't have goals. Many don't have goals that actually motivate them. And many people actually, unfortunately, don't know what motivates them. Is it fear? Is it motivation? Is it growth? Is it self-perception? Is it rewards? There's different motivational factors that drive our ability to do what we need to do. The second thing I would tell you that most sales managers need to figure out how to handle and deal with is excuse making, accountability. We call it a successful mindset. You got to have responsibility, accountability, and ownership. And it's all the same mindset. It depends on where you're coming from. If you're looking at something, it's responsibility. In the middle of it, it's ownership. When you got to look over your shoulder after something already happened, it's accountability. And if you don't own up to or act responsible or have accountability of what you did or didn't do, we make excuses. And part of the problem is, if you make excuses, you can never learn on what you should have done or not done from last time. So excuse making covers up our belly button. The problem is, most leaders make excuses themselves and they accept excuses. Third thing I would throw at you is, from a sales manager standpoint, accountability. And accountability is not a negative thing. Accountability is, I'm going to help you fulfill your tasks within your behaviors to do your job, and whatever that job may entitle. And they'll show you statistics, and Harvard Business did this, that 87% of the people that were surveyed said they would like to be held accountable. Yet 84% of all leaders feel that when they hold their team accountable, they're the bad person. They don't like doing it. So you have this conflict, which is part of the world says, I'd like to have more accountability, but they also know that whenever I'm ever held accountable, I'm about to get fired. Right. And then you look at the manager's standpoint, right? And they don't want to be the person in the black suit. They think accountability is only when you're not doing your job. And great leaders understand accountability is making sure people fulfill their job, and they do it at the level and the speed and at the height that they're supposed to. So accountability, people want it, just leaders don't do it.
A question I always like to ask when I'm talking about salesmanship is, can salesmanship be taught to someone who otherwise doesn't have sales skills, or is selling something as innate as, being skilled at a sport, for instance?
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, you can't really teach speed in sport, right? So, but in salesmanship, I actually like working with people that don't like people. Salespeople that don't like people, or an introvert, engineer types, they're phenomenal at what they do because they follow process. When you take a look at a school place, or looking at your neighbor or your own son or daughter and say, wow, they have the gift of the gab, they'd be great in sales. We just talked about it. The gift of the gab doesn't make you money in sales. The problem with people with the gift of the gab is they're very good at getting people to like them. And the reason they're really good at getting people to like them is because they need people to like them. That's called need for approval. Mm-hmm. And that's the number one biggest weakness that holds back successful people. So I can train someone who's an introvert how to follow a process and be extremely good at it. I can also take someone who's an extrovert and teach them a process. The problem is sometimes they won't use it because they're afraid to make that apple cart, that need for approval, that fear of rejection. Me being not the Mr. Nice Guy will kick in, and their strength just became their weakness.
So at Sandler Training, do you have a certain niche industry that you work with? So in our closing minutes, tell our community how you may be able to help them out with salesmanship.
Sure. So regardless of what industry that you're in, if you find yourself as part of an organization, or you find yourself as an individual that you decide to put your shingle out in front of your house and you're exceptionally good at what you do, but getting it to rain is the trials or tribulations, or you're feeling frustrated because you go and you meet with individuals and it seems like it's a great meeting, and then afterwards they kind of go MIA and they give you a think it over, and you don't realize that 87% of think it overs are no's. So just like you have need for approval, Jamie, your buyer does too. Your buyer's not going to say, hey, thanks for coming by. I don't want to list the house with you. I don't like you. They say, hey, great idea. I got 2 more people to look at. Let me take a piece. Let me call you back in a couple of weeks. So anyone that's out there looking to grow their practice, less stress, more anxiety with better control, that's what we help people out with, enterprise-wise down to individual-wise.
And you can give them a call at 631-726-3537. Again, 631-726-3537, or visit mattson.sandler.com. So Glenn Mattson, thank you so much for being on the program today. An excellent discussion on salesmanship.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Greatly appreciate it, and best of luck for everyone who's listening in.
Thank you so much. Learn more about our program on thatbusinessnetwork.com and catch new episodes again each weekday morning at 9 a.m. and made available at the end of each week on iTunes and on YouTube. So please subscribe, please leave a review. It helps the show grow. You've been listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.